All right, it's 27th of September, 2023. Today's going to be a fun one. It's not a slow news day today. All right, we're covering the debate over whether a senator should resign, as well as Trump's fraud ruling, strikes, and Travis Kelce. The Menendez case. Under what circumstances should an elected politician resign? Well, not when he's just accused of something. Like, definitely should have proof of that action first. The indictment of Senator Robert Menendez on corruption charges last week has raised that question again, and it can be a tricky one. It also led to passionate debate after allegations against Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and Ralph Northam, none of whom resigned, as well as Al Franken, Andrew Cuomo, and Richard Nixon, all of whom did. Al Franken is literally videotaped groping someone or pretending to grope someone, which is illegal. So yeah, that's proof of a crime. Andrew Cuomo killed like 15,000 old people by sending corona into old folks' homes. So that's really why he stepped down. Nixon, I could do a whole video on that. All right. Okay. Yesterday, a flood of other senators called on Menendez to step down, as my colleague Annie Carney explains. Yeah, this is all a target. This is an attack on Clarence Thomas. They're going to try and say, oh, we're saying Menendez has to step down, so we want Thomas to step down too. And the Chatham House Rules line is one standard for fraud or corruption, is what they'll say. Some of the first calls for resignation came from Democratic senators running for re-election next year in swing states, and Senator Cory Booker, Menendez fellow New Jersey Democrat, joined the group too. Booker said that the indictment contained, quote, shocking allegations of corruption and specific disturbing details of wrongdoing. Menendez has rejected those calls and asked people to, quote, allow the facts to be presented in today's newsletter. I'll try to make the best case on each side of the debate. He should quit. At the crux of the argument that Menendez should resign is the idea that the standards for a U.S. senator should be higher than merely not having a criminal conviction. Serving as a senator is a privilege, not a right, and Menendez has offered no good explanation for his actions, even if they are not criminal. The federal indictment tells a jarring story. During a search of Menendez's home and safe deposit box, investigators found more than $650,000 in cash and gold bars, some of it hidden in clothing or closets, on envelopes containing money were the fingerprints of Fred Dabes, a real estate developer, and Menendez's fundraiser. Prosecutors say that Dabes was, hopefully I'm saying that right, Dabes, yeah, we're going to go with Dabes, was a go-between who gave money to Menendez and his wife Nadine in exchange for Menendez's intervention to protect the monopoly of a New Jersey company that certified meat. Investigators say Menendez also pressured a future federal prosecutor not to pursue charges against another of his fundraisers. Okay, that has nothing to do with Menendez. I guess it has nothing to do with the real estate company, but let's see. Not to pursue charges against another of his fundraisers. Okay, so that one you could offer as there, but how could he protect the monopoly of a New Jersey company? Like, there's nothing a senator can do to protect a monopoly there. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. The closest to a rationale that Menendez has offered is that his parents grew up in Cuba, where he said their money was confiscated, although he didn't explain the precise connection of his own piles of cash. He also said that the prosecutors are trying to criminalize ordinary politics. He has not said whether he considers cash gifts in exchange for senatorial influence to be ordinary politics. Many other politicians believe that he has damaged the credibility of the Senate and the Democratic Party. They don't have any. What credibility do they have? They lie as a matter of course. They're right now saying that the worst economy in all of history is good. No, they don't have credibility. Nobody believes them except for their voting base. That's it. And they will believe him no matter what. So that doesn't matter. By remaining in office without offering a reasonable explanation of his behavior, he has contributed to cynicism about politics, his critics say, and he is unable to do his job effectively. This is hilarious on a day that a judge ruled just on his own, without a jury, without a trial. This is hilarious. His refusal to resign is a problem for Democrats both substantively and politically, writes Michael Goldberg of Times Opinion. The one Democrat who benefits from Menendez's remaining in the Senate, the critics say, is Menendez. He should fight. 6 years ago, another member of the U.S. Senate faced calls to resign from office. That senator was Franken, the Minnesota Democrat and former comedian whom several women had accused of touching them in inappropriate ways. After weeks of criticism, Franken did resign. He has since said he regrets having done so. Some other Democrats also regret the rush to judge him. In hindsight, they believe that Franken at least deserved a chance to contest the accusations in an ethics hearing. He's filmed. James Mayer of the New York has written a helpful article about the case. The Franken case offers a reminder that the American political system does have ways to adjudicate accusations against elected politicians. Most importantly, members of Congress do not have lifetime tenure. Ultimately, voters can decide whether a politician's behavior is disqualifying. As it happens, Menendez's current Senate term, his third, expires in about 15 months. Another New Jersey Democrat, Representative Andy Kim, has already announced a primary challenge, and more may follow. Voters can make a judgment soon. This is not the first time that Menendez has been indicted in a corruption case. Federal prosecutors also charged him back in 2015, but the jury deadlocked and prosecutors declined to retry him. Later that year, New Jersey's voters reelected him. Menendez understandably mentioned that history during his fiery public remarks this week. In effect, he seemed to be saying, "What's the rush? Don't I deserve another opportunity to persuade people the prosecutors have overreached?" And yeah, this brings up the point. He is exactly what I said earlier. Remember, I just said Democrats will vote no matter what. The dude was literally being tried for corruption. The jury deadlocked, but people voted him back in anyway. They don't care. You have D next to your name in Jersey, you're getting voted in. What's next? When politicians resign under pressure, it's often because they understand that they could otherwise be impeached and removed from office. That was true of Cuomo, Nixon, and Elliot Spitzer. When politicians are unlikely to be removed, they rarely quit, and Menendez faces little risk of removal. Only the Senate can expel one of its members. It has not done so since the Civil War. Yes, there are exceptions, politicians who quit voluntarily. Franken was one. Spiro Agnew, Nixon's first vice president, was another. He resigned in 1973 as part of a plea deal with prosecutors. But Agnew highlights the larger principle: politicians don't tend to quit unless they think doing so benefits them. Maybe Menendez's situation will become so uncomfortable that he changes his mind and steps down, or maybe New Jersey voters will again decide his political fate. For more, Menendez is scheduled to be arraigned today in a Manhattan court along with his wife, Nadine. Prosecutors have spent much of Menendez's 18-year Senate career looking into murky relationships between his office and special interests. I mean, if you did this with every senator, you'd find the same thing. All right, so what do they say about Trump's ruling? That's it, 3 lines. All right, Donald Trump's fraudulently inflated the value of his properties by as much as $2.2 billion. A judge ruled Trump could lose control of several properties, including Trump Tower. Agreed key takeaways from the decision. The ruling challenges Trump's narrative about his business career that made him a national figure. That's it. That's all you're going to say. So a judge decided all on his own. He said that Mar-a-Lago was only worth $18 to $27 million. There are tiny little real homes in Florida that sell for $40 million that are like 0.6 acres. And the judge has the audacity to say that Mar-a-Lago, a sprawling compound, is worth less than houses in Florida. That's absurd. That's patently absurd to allow that to happen. And this is another instance where a judge, not a jury, a judge has just decided. This is apparently, we're just going to allow this to happen in America, where judges can now come in and just strip someone of all of their business. I mean, they're barely even mentioning it here, but if this is allowed to stand, Trump is going to appeal, of course, but if this is allowed to stand without a trial by jury, a judge can just completely take away someone's company, say that, oh, you know what, I don't like your property valuations, and then claim you've committed fraud. There's no person that actually suffered. No, they're not alleging that no one got paid. They're not alleging that any bank, like every single bank that he got a loan from, did their diligence and said, we agree with these valuations. They had their loans and those loans got paid back. So no one's alleging that any harm, any tort actually took place here. So this is fraud without a victim. And we're going to just strip a guy of his company based on a judge's decision to value property in absurdly lowball fashion. This is absolutely, just beyond the pale. All right. We'll see how that goes in appeals, though, because this was a New York state Supreme Court judge. So this is going up, or appeals court. So it's going to the Supreme Court. Okay, so politics. The Senate passed a bipartisan bill that would keep the government open into November and aid Ukraine. House Republicans haven't yet passed their own bill. Of course, we got to take care of Ukraine. I mean, forget America, forget our southern border or anything, but Ukraine, yay. Trump will skip the Republican debate tonight. His poll lead has grown, even though he skipped the first debate. Even though he doesn't need to debate. He's the front runner. There's no one that's going to challenge him, and the Democrats keep giving him more press. I mean, this is another thing that he's going to go up in polls today because people are going to look at this. I mean, even if you're a Democrat, you should really be concerned that a judge can just on a whim decide things like this. I know that it's against the orange man, But you should think about what the implications for the future are, because they can do this to others now. Um, Hunter Biden sued Rudy Giuliani, accusing him of illegally spreading personal data from the laptop that left at a repair shop. So once again, this is Hunter admitting, yeah, that was my laptop. They're trying to claim that Giuliani may have altered the contents, but you can prove that he didn't. And forensic analysis proves that the data was Hunter's, absolutely his. We have multiple ways to confirm this. The laptop's his. He's now admitting it. On the laptop is evidence that Joe Biden is a criminal. On the laptop is evidence that Joe and Hunter illegally sold access and engaged in a number of bribes. President Biden's dog Commander bit another Secret Service agent. That's like 11. How is this allowed? Biden is a horrible dog parent, because you can only that's the only reason that ever happens. Biden joined striking auto workers on a picket line in Michigan. Stick with it, he said, through a bullhorn before fist bumping and shaking hands with marchers. He appears to be the first U.S. president to join, sitting U.S. president to join striking auto workers. Historian said, it's not appears, he is. And it's highly inappropriate for him to do. But whatever. We know the president will do the right by the working class. Sean Fain, the union's leader, said, not really. I'm sorry, but the auto workers here are in their own little category. And, Biden said workers should be able to bargain for the 40% raise they've demanded. Here's what else the union wants. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think that the CEO of some of these should be making as much as they do either, but a 40% raise, come on. Trump will also speak to auto workers in Detroit. As a businessman, he both circumvented and appeased unions. More on strikes. Hollywood's writers can return to work. The union leaders decided to end their strike. Oh, that sucks. As members prepare to vote on a new contract. Well, the actors are still on strike, so at least we don't have more filth coming. Las Vegas hospitality workers voted to authorize a strike against major resorts on the Strip. Monopoly lawsuits. The U.S. sued Amazon, accusing it of abusing its monopoly to keep prices high. The suit has been years in the making. Lena Khan, the head of the FTC, first set out the arguments in Amazon when she was a law student. Google is pushing to limit transparency at its separate monopoly trial last week. Much of the testimony was given behind closed doors, which I love. This is great. We're allowing Google to have all this testimony behind closed doors, even though they're a massive monopoly, and we're just going to let these secrets stay. Social media. Under a new EU law, social media companies could be fined for failing to fight disinformation on their platforms, which is interesting because, now the EU gets to be Big Brother. Reddit will pay users for popular posts, the BBC reports. That ought to work out well and become more of a left-wing echo chamber. Let's see. Nagorno-Karabakh, an Armenian enclave in Azerbaijan, survived decades of war, but its collapse into Azerbaijani control last week was sudden. At least 100 people died in northern Iraq after a fire tore through a wedding hall. Man, that sucks. Other big stories. J.P. Morgan Chase agreed to pay $75 million to settle a lawsuit accusing it of enabling Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking operation, which, pretty light penalty to pay because they knew he was doing it the entire time. And most definitely they bought clients too. Jamie Dimon is a buyer. Come sue me. Columbia University is the largest private landowner in New York City. It pays almost no property taxes. Barbed wire fences cover the American West. Virtual fences could restore pristine landscapes. Yeah, right. Oh, here's a column by Jamie Bowie on Clarence Thomas. I'll bet you it's resign. See? Yeah, should not get away with it. And it's going to be one standard of fraud. Let's see. All right, so let's see. It's hard to think of a comparison point for the corrupt behavior of Justice Clarence Thomas. Accused corrupt behavior. He hasn't actually done anything illegal. We've had partisan justices. We have had ideological justices. We have had justices who favored, for banal reasons, one interest over another. But it is difficult to think of another justice in the history of the Supreme Court who has been as partisan and as ideological and as venal as Thomas, to say nothing of the fact that significant parts of his life have been subsidized by the grass of some of the wealthiest men in the country. Most recently, for example, Thomas was found to have attended a 2018 gathering of conservative donors convened by Stand Together, a political organization founded by billionaires Charles and David Koch. part of what has become known as the Koch network. Thomas arrived at the event by private jet, paid for an unknown benefactor, an appearance that was arranged for with the help of Leonard Leo, the vice president of the Federalist Society. The justice was brought in to speak, ProPublica reports, in the hopes that such an access would encourage donors to continue giving. Um, I guess that's all. I guess we're not going to get to see, but that's what it's going to be: is one standard of fraud. This is true of every other Supreme Court justice, including all the liberal ones. They do the same thing. Remember, AOC was at a Met Gala dinner that cost $500,000 a plate, which is more than she even makes. Who paid for that? Who paid for her six-figure dress? Dark money is on both sides of the political aisle. So, unless you're going to go after your own side on it, I don't care what you have to say about others, especially when, okay, so he goes to talk at events with friendly societies. And so rich guys pay for him. So he's a vaunted member of the Supreme Court. His legal scholar, his opinion as a legal scholar is highly respected. So yeah, people pay him to go out, and they'll fly him out in style to get him to go out and talk. He's a Supreme Court justice. You can't bribe him. He can't be fired. He can't be removed from office. He has a lifetime tenure. There's nothing to offer him. Okay. Let's see. Who cares about Taylor Swift? Smithsonian acquired an unpublished manuscript by Phyllis Wheatley, an enslaved woman and the first American of African descent to publish a book. That would be interesting to read. All right, this day in history. Today's highlight: on September 27th, 1996, in Afghanistan, the Taliban, a band of former seminary students, drove the government of President Rabini out of Kabul, captured the capital, and executed former leader Najibullah. Yep, that was the beginning of it. And in 1779, John Adams was named by Congress to negotiate the Revolutionary War's peace terms with Britain. In 1825, the first locomotive to haul the passenger train was operated by George Stephenson in England. In 1854, the first great disaster involving the Atlantic Ocean passenger vessel, occurred when the steamship SS Arctic sank off Newfoundland. Of the more than 400 people on board, only 86 survived. In 1928, the United States said it was recognizing the nationalist Chinese government. In 1939, Warsaw, Poland, surrendered after weeks of resistance to invading forces from Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union during World War II. In 1956, Olympic track and field gold medalist and Hall of Fame golfer Babe Didrikson Zaharis died in Galveston, Texas at age 45. In 1964, the government publicly released the report of the Warren Commission, which concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in assassinating President John F. Kennedy, which is a load of crap. Complete and total farce. And in the 80s, they have a new classified one that comes to a different conclusion. We don't know what it is, other than it's different. So, but today is the day of the anniversary of that. How lovely. 1979, Congress gave its final approval to forming the U.S. Department of Education, and it has been an utter failure ever since. 1991, President George H.W. Bush announced in a nationally broadcast address that he was eliminating all U.S. battlefield nuclear weapons and called on the Soviet Union to match the gesture. In 1994, more than 350 Republican congressional candidates gathered on the steps of the U.S. Capitol to sign the Contract with America, a 10-point platform they pledged to enact if voters sent a GOP majority to the House, which they did by overwhelming margin. In 1999, Senator John McCain of Arizona officially opened his campaign for the 2000 Republican presidential nomination, the same day former Vice President Dan Quayle dropped his White House bid. And that was a fun one. In 2012, NFL referees returned to the field after a tentative deal with the league ended a lockout. 2013, President Barack Obama and Iranian President Hassan Rouhani spoke by telephone, the first conversation between American and Iranian leaders in more than 30 years. In 2017, Playboy magazine founder Hugh Hefner died at the age of 91. In 2018, during a day-long hearing by Senate Judiciary Committee, Christine Blasey Ford said she was 100% certain, and that was an absolute lie. that she was sexually assaulted by Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh when they were teenagers, and Kavanaugh told the senators he was 100% certain he had done no such thing. And Kavanaugh is the one that's correct. He's the one that had proof. Blasey Ford lied on the stand repeatedly, embarrassing herself. Then she signed a fake book deal agreement, got $1 million advance, hasn't wrote the book deal, disappeared from the headlines because, of course, she did such a poor job of lying on the stand, saying that she's afraid to fly and she couldn't fly the first time. And then she talks about how she flew multiple times without any help. She doesn't remember the year that it happened, the house that it happened, how she got out. That's my favorite one, is that she has no idea whom gave her a ride home. So supposedly this woman escaped from being raped, ran downstairs out of a house that she hadn't been to. So she was already in a place she was afraid of. And then she ran into a car, and some mysterious person whom she has forgotten drove her home. That's believable. Totally believable.